Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is sew the front buttonhole placket. So you clean finish the top edge of it here, and then you position it 3/8 of an inch down, which is the neckline seam allowance. This is what it looks like from the inside after you've joined it. I made a mistake, so that's why I'm showing you this now. So here I am joining it. As you can see, at first I didn't clean finish the top edge, but you should do that. Clean finish the top edge and the bottom edge and fold it in half, and then join it along the side seam to the front piece. And the very first step, you're doing your bust darts. Sorry, I started recording this late, but do your bust darts first, and then join the front buttonhole placket here on the side, 3/8 of an inch down from the top, because the top of the buttonhole placket is clean finished, whereas the neckline you're going to add a facing later. So now I am just overlocking the side seam where I joined that buttonhole placket to finish that edge, and ending at the notch here. And that notch is your pocket notch, the top pocket notch actually. Your placket will actually go all the way to the notch, mine didn't because I had it in the wrong place. Okay, so now we're attaching the back button facing to the back piece. See, I overlocked one side and then the top and bottom short edges. So the one side that you didn't overlock, you're going to attach that to your side seam. I'm using this side seam on the left back because I'm putting my closure on the left side. So I'm just pinning it, and then I'm going to stitch it at 1/2 inch, which is what the side seam allowance is. And this one you're going to join it all the way flush with the top edge because the top edge here is not clean finished. Now we're moving on to the pockets. So you should have 4 pieces, making 2 pockets. I am going to sew on the machine first so that I can make sure I get my exact 3/8 seam allowance all the way around, and then I'm going to overlock after. You can also just go straight to overlock if you're feeling like you don't want to spend this extra time, but since it's such a curved seam, I just find it easier to do machine stitch first and then overlock second. So now we're moving on to overlock, and it's actually easier if you start with the top side of the pocket because the bottom has that weird, like, really quick curve. So I just find it easier to finish it off with that messy curve here, like that. Okay, so I did both pockets. You want to pause here and do both. But now we're going to join this to the left side front, which has the placket. So you're going to turn the pocket inside out, and you're going to lay it on the outside with the face up of the front left jumpsuit. And there's notches on the pocket, and you're going to match those to the notches here on the front jumpsuit. And then you're just going to stitch in between the 2 notches, making sure you're only stitching from notch to notch and only the bottom layer of the pocket and the jumpsuit layer. So you're stitching through 2 layers, and make sure you don't catch the other side of the pocket or any of the seam allowance, or else it'll get really messy. Okay, so I'm just showing you that I stopped right at the notch here. Trim your threads. Okay, now we're going to lay the back left piece with the face side down. So it'll look like this. You'll have your placket here. Oh, I already pressed this, so you want to press your placket back first. And then we're going to join this at the notches to the available side of the pocket, which will be on top. Just matching your notches, making sure that you're not getting the seam allowance caught in there. And this is, again, 1/2 inch seam allowance. You know, take your time, make sure you get it perfect. Pockets are hard. But I have found that this method works really well for me. I actually don't even know if this is how everyone else sews pockets, so we'll find out. But this has been very easy, and I've made this jumpsuit many times, so I'd recommend it. Okay, so now everything, we have a side seam attached just with the pocket. So you can see here. And then there's a little area above the pocket that we'll have to close, and then we'll close the side seam below the pocket as well. You'll pull this out, but first I like to overlock this seam allowance of the pocket. Oh, nope. Yes. Okay, we're going to overlock the seam allowance on the pocket. And again, you're just going to make sure that you're only overlocking between the notches, and try really hard not to catch any of the other layers or the seam allowance. This is a little bit tricky, but I think you can do it. You're just gonna, once you get to the notch, just quickly pull the fabric away so that you're not going beyond the notch. It just makes it better when you're washing it because, you know, these threads will unravel. If you don't feel comfortable overlocking it, you can just do another stitch, like 1/4 inch in, and that will help prevent fraying. Or if you have pinking shears, you can use those to cut the edge, which can help prevent fraying when you're washing it. But the overlock just looks nice because everything else is going to be overlocked inside. Okay, so now we're just going to join this little side seam. Above the pocket. So I was figuring this out as I went, so just excuse me for trying to figure out what needs to be turned what direction. But basically the front buttonhole placket, you're going to turn it so that it's in between all the layers, and then the back one, you're going to press it open and you're going to stitch along the seam that you've already made by joining the back button placket. And you're just going from the end of the front button placket there to the pocket notch. And if you go a little bit beyond the pocket notch, it will just ensure that you didn't have any tiny holes or gaps where the pocket was joined. But you can also just check it and then go back to the machine if you have to. Okay, so that's that. You can see, since, yep, the front buttonhole pocket is going to be, that little corner is going to be on the outside, so that's why you pushed it in before you stitched this. And now we're just going to finish the side seam below the pocket. So again, you're just going from the notch, and it's 1/2 inch seam allowance, and just closing, joining the front and the back. And you'll get to, there's a notch about halfway down, and you just want to make sure that the front and back piece are lined up at the notch. You should pin your notches, and that just helps ensure that you're not accidentally pulling one side more than the other, and if you were, they wouldn't be lined up when you get here to the bottom. So the notch just helps you make sure you keep them matched correctly. And then we're just overlocking that side seam. And stopping at the notch again. So you're going to kind of turn it at an angle like this so that you don't catch the pocket. So now we're just doing the other pocket. It's the same process. Turn it inside out, and then you join it to the notches, and then stitch the bottom layer of the pocket to your jumpsuit piece. Just in between the notches. So now we're placing the back on top. So right sides are together for the two jumpsuit pieces, and then we're just matching the open edge of the pocket with the notches on this piece. And then we're going to stitch those two layers together. Again, your seam allowance is 1/2 inch on this whole side seam, so that includes the pocket. Okay, yep, there it is. And we're going to overlock just between the notches on each side. Love having a trash can right here. Highly recommend making your life as easy as possible and keeping your space clean. And trimming as you go, because you'll miss a lot if you wait till the end. Okay, now we're just closing the side seam. So there's no placket on this one, so we go all the way from the top, 1/2 inch seam allowance. We're just closing the side seam. There's a notch to match the front dart to the back, and then ending at the pocket notch. I'm just checking to make sure I don't have any holes at the top of the pocket. And then closing the lower side seam. Definitely if you have issues, like see here the notches, so I'm going to pin it. You should be pinning, especially if you're using like a silky fabric, pinning it so that they stay together. And then overlocking again all the way to the pocket notch, and then the lower side seam as well. I'm just starting from the bottom because it's easier. To finish off at the pocket this way. So now your jumpsuit's in 2 pieces, a left side and a right side, since you've joined the front and backs at the side seam. So now we're going to create a tube by joining the inseam. So with right sides together, you're going to match up the crotch point on the front and back here and pin this. And there is a notch somewhere here that you're going to pin. And then just pin it here at the end as well. This notch down here is for the hem if you're going to do the standard 1.5 inch hem. And then I'm just sewing. This is 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then you're going to overlock this as well to finish it clean. And I'm going to go ahead and do the other side and not record it, so if you want to pause so that you can do the other inseam, and then I'll show you what to do when you have both of them finished. So the side without the button placket, you're going to turn it right side out, and then you're going to put it inside the other piece with the button placket, which will be inside out. So basically the 2 right sides will be together, and then if you see here towards the left, those are the 2 center fronts, and you're going to match up this U-shaped saddle seam and the 2 crotch points here, and you're going to sew along and down the center front and up the center back. So I pinned the 2 pieces together here, and this is the U shape I was talking about, where you follow if you're following the pins. And so right now I'm starting with the center back seam, so the left and right back are joined. And I'm sewing 1/2 inch seam allowance around. It's important to make sure these are obviously lined up really well. And your point for checking that is when you get to the crotch point, making sure that those two inseams are meeting perfectly in the middle. So this is the same if you're doing pants or something. It's just like a very long rise of pants. And then we're just going to overlock that seam all the way around. Now I'm just turning this, pulling the one leg out from inside the other leg. Okay, now we're sewing the straps. So you have these two long 2-inch by, I think it's like 16-inch piece. So you're folding it in half long ways, and then it's a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So you're going to close the open side. If you want to also, I mean, you can do lots of strap variations for this jumpsuit. I've done it with spaghetti strap. I've also not folded this piece in half and just baby hemmed both sides to create like a 2-inch wide strap, which was cute, and I did it super wide, so it was kind of like on the shoulder cap a little bit, in like a slinkier fabric. So like with a structured fabric, that probably wouldn't work as well. But yeah, feel free to do whatever. This 1 inch is just kind of easy go-to. And the straps have a lot of extra length. I think for me it's like 3 or 4 inches extra. So you can really adjust them to whatever length you need, and I'll show you that. So now we're turning these inside out. So I put a safety pin through a single layer and then turn it back to the inside, and then I'm just, grabbing it with my left hand and scrunching, and then flipping the strap inside out this way. And then you just have to press them. So I've already pressed them now, but make sure they're really flat. So these are your facings. They will have fusing on them, so fuse side up. And then you're going to join them at the side seam. So it's going to be at the right side seam because the left side has the button placket and button closure. So I'll show you. When it's laid flat with the triangle notch up, that's the top neckline edge. Your curved facing is the back facing, and that one will be on the left. And then you're going to overlock all the way on the bottom edge of that long continuous facing that you've made. So the bottom is just the one that doesn't have the triangle notches on it. So that's the inside, clean side. And I overlocked these sides, but you actually don't need to do that because they will be finished cleanly. I was just figuring this out as I went. I mean, you definitely can if you want to, but it's not necessary. Okay, so the straps, we are going to only pin them to the front jumpsuit for now. So there's 2 notches, and the strap should fit perfectly in between them, and you're just going to pin it on the outside, so towards the face side of the fabric. So right now, see, I have the inside up, so I'm putting them on the other side. And then the facing is also going to be attached on that side because then it will be flipped around to the inside. So the triangle notch needs to match the center front seam or the center back seam, depending which facing it is. So you're going to pin it starting at the triangle. Oh, this is just showing you that I messed up that, and I finally fixed it. This was when I realized that I messed up the button placket. Okay, so the facing has been pinned all the way around, and I'm sewing 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Or no, 3/8, sorry. 3/8. It'll be from the very, even with the top of the front button placket, right? And then 3/8 around. So since the back doesn't have the straps attached, we're actually going to leave that space open where the straps are supposed to go in. So basically when you get to the strap notch, you're going to backstitch and see is what I'm doing here, and not stitch across where the strap should go, and then start again to go across the center back triangle notch and seam. To the other strap notch and then stop. And leave that area open. And then start from the next notch. To where the back placket is joined. So once you get to that side seam where the placket is joined, you're going to rotate and stitch perpendicularly down to finish off the edge of the facing. So this was where I was trying to figure out how that was closed. So this is the perpendicular stitch I just did on the back piece, but now showing you on the front piece, this is what it's going to end up looking like. So, yep, the front placket has to be pushed in towards the face side, and then the facing on top of it, and then you're stitching down perpendicularly to the neckline edge, just directly on top of the seam where the placket was joined. So it's, you know, 1/2 inch in from the side and all the way to the bottom of the facing. You should clip your corners at a diagonal, but I didn't. But when you turn it out, this is what it would look like. Okay, so that's the back once you turn it out. So this one, the facing actually goes on top of the back button placket, so the back button placket is turned in. See? And now I'm just checking where the, oh no, I'm understitching, sorry. So I'm starting in about 1/2 inch, and to understitch you're grabbing all of the seam allowances together and placing them underneath the facing. So you're stitching through all the layers except the jumpsuit body. And you're kind of pulling with your right hand a little bit more than you're pulling with your left hand. And you're stitching it 1/16 of an inch to the right of the facing join seam. And that just ensures that the facing stays inside. It keeps it from popping out while you're wearing it. And I just start, oh, and here you're not going to, stitch over that hole that you left, because that would close it and defeat the purpose. So you have to do the same thing where you're breaking the understitch to allow for those holes to still be there. And I was saying I'm starting like 1/2 inch in from the corner because it's really hard to get the understitch. I mean, I don't know how to get the understitch all the way to the corner. I tried a few ways, but this was just the easiest, and it doesn't necessarily need to go all the way there. So again, breaking the stitch so that the hole for the strap can still be there, open. And in the front you just go all the way, and the strap is included in all the layers that you're understitching through. And so then here I'm just going to stop about 1/2 inch in from that corner. That's it. Okay, now we're just stitching this button placket down because it's free hanging right now. So it's been pressed back. Oh, I was just checking where the stitch needed to be cornered off so that it wasn't visible when the front placket was over it. But basically I'm stitching directly in the center of the overlock. You can do in the center of the overlock or just slightly to the right of it. It's about 5/8 of an inch from the side seam. And this is just an extra layer that reinforces what your buttons are attached to, so it just makes them more secure and less likely to rip through the fabric, and also just provides a clean finishing for this edge. So once you get down here to the corner, you're going to turn it 90 degrees and just finish it off towards the side seam. And I made it like 1/8 of an inch shorter length than the front buttonhole placket, just so you don't see it when the placket's closed and it looks nice. Also, the bottom of that front button placket, if it annoys you that it's kind of like flapping in the wind, you can stitch it down to the back. Just top stitch it. So, to further hold the facing in, since we don't have a lining, it needs to be tacked. So we're tacking it at the center front seam right now. This is called stitching in the ditch, I believe. But we're stitching directly on top of that seam, like right inside the seam, and catching the facing. So I'm doing this about 1 inch down from the top edge, basically catching the facing right around and above where the overlock is, and I'm doing only like 3 or 4 stitches forwards and back, at least twice, to just ensure that the facing is being held securely here. This can be a little stressful because it's such a visible area, but as long as you're using a matching thread color, it's really, see, hardly noticeable, and no one else is going to notice it at all. You'll notice it a little bit. So now we're just going to do the same thing on the side seam. And then the center back. And that should be good enough, just having it in those 3 places. So now we're going to pull the straps through. So left front strap needs to go through the left back hole. Well, this is the right one that I'm doing first, but so pull it through the hole, kind of just whatever, guess an amount, and then we're going to pin it in place there. And same with this one. Pull it through. Kind of try to make them about the same length, and then pin it. So now we're trying it on. You can adjust the straps however you want, but the fit has been made to be worn really low on the chest, so about 1.5 inches up from your apex point. That's what it looks like in the back. You can check too if you want to take it in a little bit. At this point, it's kind of annoying to do that, but you totally can. You'll just have to create a seam in the middle of the facing and take it in from the back. That'll be easier. But just, you know, take your time, wear it around, make sure it feels comfortable, as low as possible, but not too low. Make sure you pin your button placket close so you can get the full fit and effect. And then check also how long you want the hem to be. So I actually went ahead and forgot to record this, but I joined the back strap by just continuing the understitch and then overlocking, cutting off the extra strap and overlocking to clean finish it. So the same way you did the understitch with the front, just pull all the layers except for the main body and hold them together, and then continue the stitch on, and that will join the strap. And you'll just press it if there's any weird creasing here on the outside. Just press it again to get rid of that. It'll be totally fine. This is super like hack way of adding the strap later, since we're not actually doing the neckline seam and I'm just cheating by only doing the understitch, but it works perfectly fine and it's way easy. So I recommend doing it this way. That's it for the straps. Here's just another view. See, my stitching is not perfect. My understitch is a little bit squiggly, but you know what? It's on the inside. Who cares? And this is just showing you, so when you're stitching it, yeah, you're gonna lay it flat like this. The seam allowance and everything is pushed to the left, and you're just stitching through all of those layers with your understitch. So do that for both straps at the back. I also ended up tacking the facing to the dart seam allowance because I didn't use fusible interfacing, so mine was not sturdy, so I just needed another place for tacking because it was kind of pulling out. And then the best part of sewing is pressing everything so it looks a million times nicer than it did before, with steam, if your fabric allows. So just press everything super nice and clean. And now we're just finishing the hem. So I'm doing the lazy hem. If you look at the sewing instructions, there's two options. The lazy way is just to overlock the edge and then turn it up whatever amount and then stitch it. So since this fabric is this is a silk linen, so I feel like it's a little bit fancier than the other cotton ones I did. So I am actually doing only a 1/2 inch hem here because I want it to be almost floor length. So I'll show you. I a little bit regret doing it so long because it kind of can trip you up. But yeah, so the standard is 1.5 inches. I'm only doing here a 1/2 inch. So just, you know, like I said, when you do your fitting, really wear it around and decide, even pin up the hem, whatever length you want, just to make sure that it doesn't get in your way, because the pants are really wide and have a lot of fabric in them. So, you know, going up and down stairs can be problematic if they're too long. So just do some wear tests. But here I'm using my chalk pencil. Since I'm doing a 1/2 inch hem, I'm doubling that amount, and I am marking 1 inch all the way around with my chalk. And that's because I'm going to fold the bottom edge up to this line to get my 1/2 inch hem. So that's why you double it, because it's folded in half. And then pin it all the way around. And then I'm just going to stitch it, and I'm going to stitch down the center of the overlock, which will actually be about 3/8 from your mark point on the machine. It's about 1/4 of an inch in from the edge of the overlock. Do this for both legs, obviously, which I will not show you. Okay, last thing is buttons. So I love contrasted buttons. I think like that effect on this is just really nice because it's just one little detail on an otherwise totally solid thing. So I spaced my buttons, now I don't even remember, I think it's 1.5 inches, but check the sewing instructions. And I just marked with my chalk the location of each button. So how I sew buttons is that I start from the top side and then I go down and back up and then tie this knot with a long tail. So don't cut off that long tail. You'll need it later. And then go through the bottom of the button, diagonal through the other hole, and then go all the way down through both layers and up through the opposite diagonal, and then do that X. And you really, I have a double thread here, so you really only need to go through each diagonal twice, so 4 threads through each diagonal. X is plenty to stay and be secure. So you're just going down and up, creating your X. And then on the last time, after you've done the 4, you go up, but not through the button, pull it out from underneath the button, and then I swing this around the button twice, and then tie with that extra tail I left, tie a double knot. There we go. And then I swing it around one more time and then tie another double knot. This is like maybe a superstitious thing that I do, but it works, and I cannot remember the last time I had to re-sew a button, so go for it. Do it this way. And they look clean on the back because there's no knot tied on the back of the inside. So now I went ahead and cut all of my buttonholes. So I just checked and I marked them, and I created these vertical slash. So they need to be the same length as the button, and then you want your button to kind of sit in the center or slightly towards the top of the slash. And obviously you're just spacing the buttonholes the same distance that you're spacing the buttons, but just to make sure that I had spaced everything correctly, I put all the buttons through the holes as I went. So the ones here that you see the buttons through the holes, I haven't stitched those buttonholes yet. So to hand stitch buttonholes, you're doing a blanket stitch. So if you don't know what that is, you go from the bottom, so through the center of the hole, and then up through the 2 layers, center of the hole, up through the 2 layers, like a 1/16 of an inch in, and then you catch your needle through that loop that you created. And I do it from the bottom, or I guess from the side closest to me, up. And you want to go the same direction every time so that your stitches all look consistent. So always, when you're doing it, it's like under the left top stitch. It's harder to explain than I realize. But there's good tutorials for blanket stitching on YouTube. Maybe I'll do a separate one. To make it look clean on the top and bottom ends, you can do like a bar tack, so just, a back and forth, like kind of looped stitch. Or you can just continue this blanket stitch all the way around, which is what I usually do. It just looks slightly less clean because it kind of creates a sunburst where, it's curving to fit around the ends. But you want to make the stitches as short as you possibly can while still getting through enough, fabric that it's not going to rip out. And yeah, I mean, it's a pretty time-consuming process, but I have to do it because I don't have a home machine that would have buttonhole feature on it right now. And, it's kind of therapeutic. And don't put too much pressure on yourself to make them look perfect because they're going to be completely covered by buttons, so it really doesn't matter. I'm also using a double thread here just to make it more secure, which I recommend, but make sure your thread isn't too thick. Like, don't use, like a Tex 80 or like a denim weight thread. Just use like your standard, whatever, Gutermann, whatever brand thread you use. Tex, 40, 30. And you don't have to watch me do this whole thing. I'm just going to finish this buttonhole. But that's it. And I hope that you had fun making this and it wasn't too painful and that it's something unique and fun to have in your wardrobe. I would love to see pictures if you are happy with how your project turned out, or even not. It's a learning process, so I'd love to get feedback on my instructions and the pattern and just hear how you like it. If there's any hacks you want to know, like strap, different alternative styles, let me know. And yeah, tag me on Instagram, send me a message, whatever suits your fancy. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll be here for another 1 minute exactly finishing this buttonhole. And I'll show you at the end what it looks like close up. And then I'm just tying this off on the back side here. Ta-da! 1 down, 5 to go. So satisfying though, right? I'll just show you what it looks like close because I'm going to sew the rest of these later.